Joined by head coach Scott Lemn from Bridgewater College football. They were picked number 3 in this year's ODAC preseason poll. You know, coach, you're not new to the program, this being your 12th season overall, but new to that lead chair. Talk to us a little bit about taking over as the head coach of the Eagles program.
Sure. Obviously, JJ, I'm taking over for a great mentor of mine in Michael Clark, and a great program that he built. So you take on this chair, there's high expectations from both our players already in the program, our fans around, and all of those things ultimately are the things that Coach Clark built. So it's been exciting to have camp and have our players back around and practicing. It has been even more energizing, and really have kind of hit the ground running from the start.
Well, I think energy around the program has been key for Bridgewater for the last several years, not too far removed from winning that ODAC title in 2019, hosting an NCAA game and nearly pulling it off there against Delaware Valley. I mean, talk a little bit about what you've seen from the program over the last several years as you've brought it back and grown it back up since winning those 4 titles in 01 through 05.
Sure. In my time here, we've competed at the top, but obviously 2019 was the first time that we won the conference. And, I think it just speaks for the character that our players had that season. We had a lot of guys that stepped up, and our senior class was really unbelievable. And they were a sophomore class that really got beat up on. And so they had played a lot of football by the time they got to that season. And we really took a turn in 2018. As we got the conference title, we lost a really, really tough game to Randolph-Macon that came down to the wire. And then ultimately, we didn't lose another game until we lost to Delaware Valley in the playoffs. And so, it was a salty bunch of guys that had taken their wounds, and when they were young players, and then just were able to keep them around and develop them. And by the time they finished, they were able to put a cherry on top of their experience.
Well, all those good programs have a little bit of that salt, a little bit of that grit that you're talking about. And some of it was needed last year and going through the very first spring season in ODAC history. Obviously different for everybody. You going 3-2 overall through it, played Shenandoah twice. Talk a little bit about 3 times. That's right. You did play him 3 times. Talk a little bit about what it was like going through that season, but also the aspect of still being able to compete and go out there and play some meaningful games and get guys some good reps.
Sure. I think most importantly, through the fall, our athletic administration and then our athletic training group did a great job for our athletes to be able to practice and prepare. And so as we got to that spring competition, it wasn't like it was an abnormal routine for our athletes in the things they had to do to practice. There were some adjustments as far as what they had to do in the locker room. I mean, we had timers on guys. We had to check in, and we actually had a counter that you would find, and making sure that we weren't over occupancy in our locker rooms. And so as opposed to the locker room being a place to hang out, it was throw your stuff on, throw your stuff off, and get out of there so the next guy could get in. And we had to set up our locker room very specifically for that as well. We broke practice differently in the groups that left. So some of the organizational things changed as much as what the players had to prepare for. The best part was once we got out to the practice field, other than making sure that they were staying distanced as they were out on the field, standing around, practice was really business as usual. And so, again, I think it speaks volumes for the ODAC and for the conference that they put together a season for our athletes to be able to compete in and really had a successful spring.
Well, that spring campaign was undoubtedly unique for everybody, us included, but more so on you all at the school level that really needed to make it happen. But I'm curious also, as we come back into a quote unquote more normal fall season coming through, is there anything to maybe playing that spring season and really jumping right back into it with your preseason here a little bit earlier in the month as you gear up here toward this fall campaign?
Sure. I think for our older players, not really. It's been a bit of a business as usual. The ones who have been in the program for a while, especially some of the ones who took the COVID waiver and came back for their 5th year.
Right.
I would say the biggest impact I've seen is in those sophomores, especially the sophomores who had cracked the starting lineup or cracked into the rotation this past spring. we talked about it a lot in the spring and especially into this fall, as we've seen the way they've performed, that, they may not have even scratched the surface of playing had we played a normal year, and we would have just looked at them as promising recruits and guys that we needed to continue to develop through but they got the opportunity to develop as players then, and we're able to step in and play some starting roles. I mean, we had 2 freshman offensive linemen that started every single game.
Wow, outstanding. I mean, it's a good thing that we were able to get some of those younger guys into it for programs like yourself. And now let's go into that and talk a little offense, defense here for your team this year. Let's start on that offensive side of the ball. Bridgewater's been solid on the line for several years, good receivers, good running backs. Quarterback was the main key change there for those 2018 and 2019 seasons when Jay Scroggins really picked up. Who's going to be under center for you this year, and who do you expect to step up at multiple positions on offense?
Sure. I mean, offensively, we're lucky enough to return 2 guys who started and won a game, in Kenny McRae and Matt Lawton.
Right.
Those guys are competing really hard right now for our starting spot. Up front, we were lucky enough that Cole Cooksey decided to take a 5th year and returned. And so, he's been providing great leadership. And, obviously when you can get an all-conference returner to be able to come back, that's up well. And actually we returned 4 of our 5 starting offensive linemen. So, those guys have really picked up well. And between Burke Snow and Tyler Duckstein and Matt Chajokian, and then out wide, we've got a great bunch of wide receivers. I mean, it's going to be tough. There's only one ball. And so we've got to work to keep them all happy. But ultimately, we've got a bunch of different guys that can make dynamic plays and could go off for big games. And then Demetrius Gillespie's coming back and taking a 5th year was an exciting decision for us as a program. And, when you can return the kind of production that he's had over the course of the year on the field, but then, most importantly, that guy really leads us off of the field in major ways, the way that he works and the way that he's developed himself. And, I think, especially as the guy who recruited him, we weren't sure what we were getting in a recruit. And he has more than paid off in dividends in what we thought.
I know all about that one ball concept, being a true Cleveland Browns fan. So I get that, especially coming into this season. But now let's talk about the other side, about keeping points off the board and whatnot. I think you've got Brett Tharp back, who was an all-conference linebacker / safety for you last year, kind of a hybrid guy. Talk a little bit about what you expect out of your defensive unit this year.
Sure. I think the same way. I mean, we return all of our starters up front on defense. And so we're old up front. We're thin, but we're old. I think in our back end, we return good experience. Obviously, Brett Tharp and his performance. And then, Brett's a unique individual. He turned around and we finished on a Saturday, and he played a weekday baseball game right after that. And then played in the county league up here through the summer for the Bridgewater Reds, played all 9 positions, and then also got married. And so
wow.
Brett's our unique cat up around there. We've got 2 defensive players who are in our master's program right now, in Dustin Green and Malik Crow. And, those guys have played a lot of football. Dustin Green is lined up all over the place for us. And so again, defensively, we return a bunch of starters, a bunch of guys who have played a lot of football, and some guys that were really impactful in 2019 as well. And so, they just understand kind of the consistency of the approach that you have to take. It's been hard in practice to gain yards when we go competitive periods.
Oh, that's a good thing to have here when you go through. I mean, obviously you'd like to see one or the other have moments from time to time, but I think that's what all the coaches are looking for. Now, as we go ahead and take a look at the league as a whole, I know it's hard to kind of benchmark off of last season coming into this year, but take a look at what you think about the ODAC this year, with Emory and Henry no longer being in the league, and then the 2-year associate membership of Southern Virginia is also out. So the league looks a little different. What do you see for the conference this season?
Sure. I mean, I think the same thing as you always expect in the ODAC. You see really competitive coaching. I think you see teams in games that are going to come down to 4th quarter decisions and 4th quarter performances that are going to have to win it. You see a conference that, is really well run kind of football wise, and football is an important sport in it. And, I think if you went around to all the teams, and you said, who's your most important game on the schedule, you would say, gosh, our first conference opponent, and then you got to keep on rolling. And so it is one that I hope our players understand. And that's one of the good things about having experience, to where they know, every game matters, and I told our guys a stat, for the ODAC, there's been more undefeated teams that have gone on to the playoffs and won the conference than 2-loss teams. And so in the last 20 years, I think it's something around, since 2000, it's 10-0 teams that have made the playoffs. And so are at least undefeated in conference. And so, you've got to do the right things in big moments.
I can honestly say that's a stat I hadn't tracked on there, but we're looking forward to seeing who possibly is going to make a run at that this year. Maybe it's your Eagles, maybe it's another squad, but Coach, I want to thank you for joining me today, and good luck the rest of the way this preseason into the new year.
Sure. Thanks, JJ. I sure hope it's our Bridgewater Eagles as well.